What's happened? Are we on? How's that, mate?
Saying live on. Yeah.
Cool. I think we're on. Okay. Firstly, huge thank you, Sean, for joining us this evening. If you could start off with just a bit of an explanation about you, your background, who you work for, etc., that'd be great.
Yeah, good evening. Thanks for having us, Ben. So my name is Sion Kitson. I currently work at Sport England in our workforce team as a development manager, specifically around coaching. So my role and responsibility, for those that know a little bit about Sport England, was obviously a distributor of funding, primarily national lottery funding, to all sorts of organisations around the country. Some of the people that those organisations work with, are elite, talented individuals. Other are at the grassroots end of sport and physical activity. One of my jobs is to support the coaches behind those organisations, coaches, instructors, volunteers in its broadest sense, in terms of getting them to think about their organisational workforce development needs for those individuals. How do they recruit people? How do they go about engaging participants? How do they go about providing really good learning environments? How do they go about retaining those volunteers, coaches, etc.? So that could be in all sorts of contexts, from NGBs, national governing bodies, to charities, to local organisations on the ground. So hopefully that gives a little bit of an idea of what I get up to.
Yeah, that's amazing, mate. Brilliant, really good. I'm going to throw us both in the deep end a little bit to start with. So I know we're going to talk about creating environments that promote physical activity in the home. And one of the biggest ways that people have been doing that so far is with Joe Wicks. So it doesn't have to be controversial. You can just give your honest opinion. What's your first thoughts when I mentioned Joe Wicks and what he's doing at the moment?
My first thought was probably a really positive one, in terms of, if this no one knew on day one of lockdown how long, and we still don't, how long things are going to last, and I suppose the pressures, the challenges it's going to put on families living so close together, on children in terms of being active. So my first thought was, this is a good thing in terms of getting young people active, getting families active. And I think sometimes in these situations, I've got a colleague of mine has a saying: don't get great get in the way of good. And I think people are having to act really quickly, having to make rapid decisions, adapt in the situations. And, there's probably, on the whole of it, something good there. It's getting families active. It's getting children active. Now, I know there's a number of people that get, I suppose, a little bit perturbed by the fact that Joe's calling it physical education. Maybe there's some work for us to do then, beyond this current situation, around the communication, the way in which we talk about physical education, the way in which it's talked about in government, we know, I suppose, being in it every day, what it can provide children in terms of their holistic development. So maybe we've got some work to do, and it's taken a situation like this to get us to think about it a little bit more. Maybe we need to be more joined up, whether it's school PE, whether it's extracurricular sport and physical activity, in terms of the messages, the learning, and the benefits that it has on young people. Overall, it's getting people up, it's getting people moving, it's bringing families together. The next step for me is, how do we provide a really diverse offer? Because it's not going to be for everyone. It's not going to be for every child. It's not going to be for every family. So what does a diverse offer look like? And also for me, I'm really interested, and I'm sure we'll come and talk about it, is how we gamify learning at home through physical activity. That's what I would like to see moving forwards over the coming weeks. How can we promote and raise awareness of some of the great things that other people are doing in that space as well?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And it's really interesting, and it's a massive talking point online at the moment. I did an initial sort of LinkedIn video, and it had something like 3,000 views within a few days, and loads of comments, like the most commented post I've ever done on LinkedIn. So it's something that people like to talk about. And my views have kind of shifted. I was very much in your camp, what you said initially around being really positive, the money that he's made for the NHS as well, families and children being active. So I didn't really see a negative initially, and I'm somewhere in between at the moment. I'm not in the negative camp, which a lot of PE teachers are and a lot of teachers are, but I'm not in the completely positive camp, which a lot of parents I think are, and they've kind of been taken along, which is great, and they've raised physical activity. I think the thing for me that made me reevaluate my initial stance was that Oak Learning got involved, and they started to endorse him, and he's on their platform as their PE teacher, and he's bringing out a PE book. Now, I've not got a problem with that, but if it starts to shape the national curriculum and the way that schools view PE, then I think there could be an issue there. But I'm with you. I think ultimately the amount of people that are active and are still active, I think this morning he still had over 100,000 people tune in live, which is incredible. And without that, what are those 100,000 people doing? So it is amazing. And the amount of minutes that have been logged, et cetera, is phenomenal, really.
I think, you know, with it, there's, and the work Sport England are doing with the schools, the Children Young People program, and around the active lives data for young people is sharing evidence and insight around you know, young people's perceptions towards physical activity, and obviously a lot of that's taking part in school as physical education. So I think, you know, I think we're in a good place to get under the skin of young people in this next generation of young people, to provide a really diverse, a really holistic offer that hopefully, you know, shifts their perceptions positively, so they have a lifelong learning in sport and physical activity. Yeah. That's my aim. Now, yeah, there's also, we talk a lot in sporting about physical literacy, around making sure that there's the competence, the understanding, the knowledge, the motivation, the enjoyment factors in that experience as well. So that's what I'm hoping that we can work across education and across other departments to promote sport and physical activity for young people.
Yeah, it's a great point. And to finish on the whole Joe Wicks thing, for me, it comes down to fun. And like you said about physical literacy and building all of those skills and movement patterns, etc., at a really young age, it allows those children to be able to enjoy physical activity and PE more. And if we can get them enjoying it more, then that lifelong learning that you just mentioned is going to be more apparent, hopefully, in young people. Yeah. Okay. Leaving that there, then, we've talked about sort of creating those environments at home, which is what we're going to theme tonight around. What alternatives are there? So we've got Joe Wicks, which is kind of like a HIIT workout. How do you see, you talk about like a hybrid and getting under the skin of it. What would you see as the kind of ideal?
I mean, at home, I think there's all sorts that we can do. My philosophy in this situation, with my own children, has to be to gamify everything. Is to come up with games and base anything that we do around getting active, around problem solving. Mm-hmm. So whether that's trying to identify some kind of movement solution over a set of objects, and, you know, identifying different paths, whether that's been playing different games and setting different levels, in terms of them going away and spending some time working out, okay, I can do level 1, that's a requirement of me in this particular way. Level 2, I need to do something slightly different. Maybe I'm holding something now, maybe I'm catching something, rather than just simply moving. So everything that I've tried to look at is does my two children, do they have some kind of decision to make, and then have to apply some kind of movement to the context that they're in, whether that's through holding something, whether that's through movement, and whether that's through catching, throwing, jumping. I think that's ultimately what I would like to see a little bit more of, in terms of those small little games in small spaces that they get so much enjoyment from. I always think, like, you know, sports always talk about other sports being their competitor. I don't know, something like, you know, football, cricket, rugby, you know, how they're competing for the attentions of young girls and young boys. Well, I think the biggest competitor, and which is driven home to me, is technology, in terms of iPads, iPhones, on the computers. My 5-year-old's a whiz already around the iPad, and he's able to download games. And what is it about those games that attracts them? Well, there's problem solving. There's different levels. They are able to award things. So how do we give award and show recognition for their achievements?
Yes, great point.
There's also something around this idea of achievement as well, that those incremental levels are only just going a little bit beyond what they've just done. So it's almost stretching them all the time and trying to tease a little bit more out of them. And those are kind of the concepts at home. So this morning we had saucepans out, and we were throwing socks into a saucepan, and that was kind of level one. And then level 2 was using tennis balls, and I was asking why is this level 2? And he was suggesting, because it bounces more. And why is that an issue? Well, it might not stay in the saucepan now like a pair of socks will. So he's starting to think about how he might throw it, and he was suggesting that, well, I'm not going to throw it straight in. I'm actually going to let it bounce and see if I can get it on the second or third bounce, because it might slow down a little bit. And now he's changing the way in which he's holding the ball. He's changing the type of throw. He's starting to make decisions and trying to solve the problem. So that's kind of the philosophy, that whether it's been the sunshine and we've been outdoors, or whether we've been indoors because it was like a blooming hurricane out there this morning, trying to look at different ways in which we create a really fun, enjoyable. But he's got to search for the problems. He's got to go about doing things in different ways for a little bit of trial and error, and them working independently or together as a little duo. So that's what I would like to see more of in terms of what's been shared at home. And I know some organizations are starting to do that, which is great. And I hope to see more.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And whilst we're on the subject, I know Yorkshire Sport Foundation, I think it is, they've hashtagged it "This is PE," and their sessions are brilliant, and sort of talk around what you've just said about problem solving, and they've incorporated household equipment, etc., etc. My youngest, Layla, this morning actually wanted to do, so we did a few YouTube videos right at the start of the lockdown, and Layla wanted to play like a battleships game that I worked out with socks, and trying to aim at one of her toys, and then we'd make the toys either further away or closer together, and we'd play against each other. We'd add in blocking, all the things that you mentioned to start making it a little bit harder for her, but she can recognise which is the harder versions. But it's fun, and she loved it.
And I'd add, don't be like, I coach, but every day I'm learning, and the 2 children in this period are teaching me a lot, And my oldest, he's taking responsibility for the learning now. So he'll either do a couple of things. He says, "Nick, I want to do something along these lines. Can I come up with something?" So no problem. Go for it. And he's understanding how to differentiate for his younger sister.
Amazing. Yeah.
So I shared something on Twitter the other day where it was a 20-second clip around him teaching her how to hop. And in that 20 seconds, there was clear instruction, there was differentiation, there was scaffolded support, so he was able to help her to get towards the goal. He phased it out for her, and there was positive praise. And I couldn't believe it. I filmed it because they spent 10 minutes doing some maths and some other problem solving, then they went outside and did some moving around. And it amazes me what they pick up. And actually, as a result, I just ask him, what do you want to do? Which bits do you like? Which bits do you want to see tomorrow morning when we do PE, if you like? And sometimes it'll be random, and it'll be I want more crocodiles and I want more jumping. Can you get that into it? And I'm like, I'll be in bed going, what can I do? But essentially they want to be moving, they want to be having fun, and they like challenge. They want to have a little bit of stretch, but they also like achieving. That's key, that we don't go too far with it that they can't achieve, I guess.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think if you throw imagination into the mix as well, you sort of mentioned crocodiles, so again, this morning, Layla was saying, can we do the game where there's a snake and you have to jump over something? I'm thinking, what game is this? And then it's suddenly twigged. It was when we were like in the jungle and we were jumping over like logs and snakes and dodging tigers and stuff like that, which is the most basic thing, but she's dodging, she's hopping, she's jumping, and her mind's obviously going crazy, and she's loving it.
And we can sort out the chaos a little bit, facilitate it. Sometimes it goes off in completely strange directions, and I'm not even sure what this is. But that's where we just facilitate that. So what we've discussed so far, if parents, and most people in this group are teachers, they're probably thinking, this makes sense, scaffolding and peer learning, etc., which is a really good point about your eldest teaching your youngest and her learning off of someone closer to her age.
For parents, when we share this onto YouTube, parents might think, I don't know what this is. So how can they relate, I suppose? Would they be able to deliver something like this?
Yeah, so I remember, and I think it takes me back to some of my childhood, and what were the games that I enjoyed. Things like hopscotch. How could you put unique twists on some of those things? Make the distances hard, like you said. Put something down on the ground and spread them further out, so they have to move slightly differently. We played noughts and crosses with tins out the kitchen cupboard. So I think we got a bit excited, probably like everyone else at the start of lockdown, and bought too many like beans and things like that, and still got quite a few floating around. So it was
one of the hoarders.
Yeah, it's like beans versus vegetables or something. So it's making use of whatever you've got really, and thinking about what are some of the fun games that you perhaps played. And it's just if you didn't have a great experience of PE. Because a lot of, we through the work at Sport England, we see a lot of people returning to it in terms of some of these initiatives for older adults and for parents, etc. And it's just about we ultimately want the same thing. We want to have fun. We want to try and achieve a little bit. We sometimes like to be stretched and challenged. We're all a little bit different on that. And often we want to work things out and feel good about it and get ourselves going mentally. So it's doing simple tag games, chase games, throwing catch games, anything along those lines that will get them moving. And again, if you have children or older children, maybe teenagers, utilize their skills and their availability, the fact that they're there and to help out, to support. And they're the best critics, our children, in terms of understanding what they like and what they don't like. They're pretty clear on that. It's important we make the most of that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And for parents that will be listening to this in a day or two's time, all the games and things that we've mentioned so far, whilst we've not gone into specifics, like target games and catching games and tag games that you've mentioned, you don't need to worry about teaching your children at home during these games. It can just be them exploring and trying different things. They're building up their core strength. They're practicing throwing, which that exploring is, in my view, just as important as a coach trying to tease stuff out of them.
No, absolutely. Now our job, if I put my coaching hat on now, is, and I heard this from a webinar earlier today, is not necessarily to correct errors. Our job is to point the young person into the direction to find some information that will put them on the right track to finding some kind of solution. So for parents out there, we don't need to go in and try and solve everything. Things like, why don't you have to hold your arm like that? Often you can't help it, but they can work it out. My boy really likes golf, but he doesn't hold the club like perhaps everyone else does. But does it mean it's wrong? No, it doesn't. If he's found a technique, then he will learn the limitations and the benefits of that over time. Is it my job to, if because there's some knowledge? Possibly. So then can I start to facilitate what he does by influencing the information that he attends to? So if we put some kind of challenge or game in there, maybe we can start to influence how he behaves or how he acts, and to come up for those things for himself. So we don't, like you say, we don't have to go in there and tell and be too instructive. Just let them play, let them get on with it, create a really fun, enjoyable environment for them, and sit back and watch them smile. That's the important thing, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree again. And going back to a memory of mine, actually, quite recent, probably 3 years ago, teaching a CPD lesson, and we were just doing some rolling and a set of some sort of fun activity stations, and we covered some really basic stuff, but ultimately it was year ones, and it was about them exploring, giving them a few sort of basics to work from, but then thinking, right, how can I roll it so that it stays in that hoop? But the teacher wanted to jump in and say, oh, you're not holding the ball correctly, your arm's not going back correctly, and sort of interject and said, just let them be. They're on task, they're doing what we want them to do. We can ask them questions to see what they're doing and why they're doing it, and then that's when that learning starts to form. Okay, great. While we're on the subject of environments, one of the things that I've struggled with at home is Izzy, my eldest, who's 6, doing maths. How can parents or teachers or whoever it is use PE as a kind of vehicle to help those children that maybe struggle with maths or English or science, whatever it might be?
Yeah, I mean, one thing, when the weather's good, I'd encourage do it outside as a starting point. Take yourself back when you're a young person. Where would you rather be, inside or outside? And they're no different in that sense. Or particularly the children that well, my children, the children that I've coached previously, they want to be out, they want to be active, they want to be exploring whilst they're doing all that learning, and incorporate gamify the maths, make it fun and interesting. So right now, my eldest is doing halves and doubles up to 10 and 20.
Yeah.
So we just created a number of the answers 1 to 20. The answers was always 1 to 20, and I created a bit of a parkour, kind of up and over the chair, underneath a hurdle.
Yeah.
And there was 2 or 3 different routes, and you would have to do the equation, make a decision, which route am I going to take? Because is it on that route, the answer? Is it 12, 14, 16? Is it over there in the single digits? And start to play around with it, and then you'd have to bring it back. And if it was right, brilliant. If it's wrong, you'd have to go again and find it. So I think there's just ways in which we can add a little bit of a fun element to it. Certainly doing maths outside. The other thing I would suggest is bring things into the experience that means something to that young person. So I've stopped using counters, because often counters don't mean something to him, and this won't mean anything to any viewers unless their child collects super zings. So my boy collects something called super zings. I don't know where we've been, but it's basically little miniature plastic figurines. There's so many to collect, and we've got about 40 of them. That's more than enough to represent counters. And all of a sudden, he wants to go and find his super things. He wants to bring back the right number. So it's about, how do we bring meaning to that experience, whether it's maths or whether it's another subject. So counters, really important, but not really getting the motivation of Arthur, my boy. So it was about what could we use, what could we really start to resemble that environment that means something to him. So gamify it, bring some kind of meaning to it. Take it outdoors when possible, would be something. Again,
that was exactly what we saw with Izzy today. That started adding in a few little challenges, a bit more physical challenges, and then she was on it, and she something stimulated her, and then yes, she still struggled to get the answers at times, but her work ethic improved no end. And I suppose the types of things that we talked about so far, maybe key stage 1, lower end of key stage 2. So key sort of year 5 and 6, who don't necessarily too cool for school, don't really jumping over sofas before they do a maths challenge. But equally, I think there probably is some physical element that they can get in there to stimulate them.
Yeah, So I know even things like create. I don't know what year 5s and year 6s do in maths right now, so it's hard for me to say. But
yeah, sure.
Knowing how they like to be competitive, knowing how they like to keep score, how do you start to put twists on some of those things that encourages them to think about maths? So I remember playing games and score lines, and I'd get called home from the other side of the park with my mum shouting, it's like 7 o'clock, you need to get in, it's dark. It would be like 48-46 after like a 3-hour game of football on the grass.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you need to spend 3 hours, but how do you challenge them? So I don't know what they're doing. Are they doing times tables? Are they doing something a little bit more sophisticated? But the other thing we did the other day was we put up, going back to your targets example, we put in some bigger numbers. Simple. This would be relatively simple for year 5s and 6s, but the scores were 10s, 20s, 50s, and 100s. So he now knows 100 and 100 is 200, because he can work out 1 and 1, and that creates 2, and I've got 200. So ways in which we utilize that competitive nature, that sports nature, that scoring methods, ways in which you're finding some of the answers in that way might be some of the things that I would possibly look to do if I had an older child.
Yeah, and just to add to that briefly, you mentioned earlier about finding something, or I mean, most parents will know what their child loves by that age, and throwing that in the mix, whether it is, they love sport, and obviously that caters to what we're talking about quite easily, but it might be that they love art, or they love music, and there might be ways to incorporate that in as well.
And I was just going to add that there's enough interesting people, either via something like YouTube or online, with some really interactive videos for different age groups that certainly stimulated my two from time to time.
Yeah, great.
We don't have to do everything. That's the thing. Look, there's so much out there. I feel a lot of parents put so much pressure, as we do, as I am right now, because a little bit worried about things. So we just have to remember that we're not alone, and there are other things out there, and it's okay to go and use those things. We don't have to do everything right here, right now, kind of thing.
Yeah. If we sort of bring it back to what we've discussed so far, initially when we spoke, and I think I was thinking it was going to be more geared towards parents, but I think what we've discussed so far, hopefully teachers that are listening to this can think, well, actually I can apply that into my math lesson that I've got coming up in June or July, whenever it might be, or even September. But equally, those parents, when things do go back to some kind of normality and their children have homework tasks and things like that, hopefully this will give people ideas to do in school, but also then parents outside of school as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And from a school perspective, obviously there's loads that are going to have to take it into consideration in regards to some kind of return or gradual stage return. But in terms of what does physical activity look like? Well, the outdoor space is obviously at the moment is being a little bit more encouraged and promoted. So the ability to take lessons into outdoor spaces at this right now looks quite favorable. So there might, like you say, there might be opportunities in which to incorporate physical activity in that sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was going to ask, I was going to go into the benefits of health and fitness and stuff, but I don't think we need to. I think we'll keep it sort of zoned in on what we've spoken about so far, and to sort of bring it close to a close. Sport England sort of mantra at the moment is building an active nation. That's correct, right? So in terms of primary schools, what role do they have to play in that? I mean, I suppose it's quite self-explanatory, but how do you see primary schools helping to help build that active nation?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the self-explanatory bit, that you referred to, and there was a bit of a chat on your page a couple of days ago about, I think the question was when the young person leaves primary school, what have they achieved? What do you want them to be? And for me, one of the goals, and I've already mentioned it tonight, is about having a lifelong passion for physical activity, for physical education as they go into secondary school, because we're all far too aware of the dropout rates that still occur at that sort of those crucial teenage years. So how we go about improving those perception rates is really important about creating happier, healthier young people, and how physical activity can support that. So I think that's the first thing, is about making sure that the next generation of young people come through with a real passion first and hunger to be active and to help others to be active. Yeah. I think if we can do that, and schools have obviously a huge role to play in that, I believe that young people, and I put this the other day, I was just tweeting saying that the bit that I really miss about coaching is how young people surprise me. And I think if we can give the tools, even to young children, primary school children, they will surprise us the way in which they can get older generations and other parts of their community active. I'm seeing the things at the moment online about young people doing all sorts of challenges, again, coming back to challenges and competition and gamification. I'm seeing people all over the internet and often on BBC and things like that, doing these wonderful challenges that are getting their communities, getting their street active, whatever it may be. So I think let's not underestimate young people. Let's give them the opportunities to thrive. Let's ensure that we build support around them, that they can help get not just their schools active, but also their communities. And I think The internet.
Sorry, Karen.
No, that's fine. And I think schools can play a big role, and I know many do, in terms of creating little student bodies or little school bodies where children play a role, not just in shaping some of the PE or other sporting opportunities, but other subjects as well. And I absolutely, encourage more of that to happen. I think then the bit that I hope we'll get to when they move into secondary school and older is that they become these leaders. They become leaders not only within their schools, but within their communities, whether they're attached to community clubs, whether they're attached to voluntary youth sort of clubs, as well as sporting organizations. And they start to I suppose reimagining what those spaces for sport and physical activity could be, and not be bound by tradition. Just keep evolving, keep looking at things differently, because as soon as we stand still, then we suffer. And I guess one, I suppose, very small positive out of this situation, because really there isn't many, is from a coaching perspective, a teaching perspective, the development of young people. Everyone's looking at trying to adapt and to do things differently. And what can we do to achieve some really positive outcomes for communities right now, in terms of building resilience, building trust, generosity, kindness, social empathy towards one another. And I think physical activity has a really strong role to play in that. And it's about, I suppose, working together, coming together to almost fuel up that energy and just kind of release it when we're able to get back to being active again.
Yeah, that's an amazing answer, Sean. Really, really. I don't know if I can add too much more to that, but I'll try and add just a few sort of case studies around what you've said around leaders, the elderly. But I'm also going to throw teachers into the mix as well. So, as you know, there's a leadership program of what we deliver into schools, and sometimes when we have those conversations with schools, and it makes sense, that instantly your sporty children pop into, they'll make a great leader. They play football on the weekend, they play netball for their local club, they'll be brilliant. But equally, there's those children that find school really tough. But you mentioned empathy, and sometimes those children work so well and they respond so well to be giving that chance. And you said about giving young people the chance to sort of thrive. And when we've seen it on numerous occasions, that children that, as I said, really struggle to engage in the classroom, but get them out onto the playground, helping younger children to be active and to enjoy PE, they're a different child. So just thought I'd throw that into the mix there. And with regards to the elderly as well, it kind of leads on to that. We've seen schools that have run sort of morning breakfast clubs, or maybe not so much breakfast clubs, but 20 minutes before school starts, and they'll have their young leaders on the playground, maybe with an adult as well, but they'll do like a morning workout, like the old wake and shake type thing.
Yeah.
But with like elderly or parents dropping their kids off, and it's amazing. I actually went to visit a school in Banbury, going back quite a few years now, when we started out, and they had 5 to 8 elderly sort of pensioners on the playground, and I was sort of a guest and sort of asked what was going on. So, we invite the local community in every lunchtime, or X amount of lunchtimes per week, and they were playing Foursquare with the children. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. The kids were like thoroughly engaged with these gentlemen or women that were in the school, but also you could see the amount of enjoyment that they were getting out of it. So I completely agree on the community side of things. And finally, and then obviously add whatever you want to what I've said, the whole teachers as well. I think if you looked at the education industry, and probably public sector to an extent, compared to the likes of your Googles or your really forward-thinking massive companies, they have walking meetings. They know that they're not supposed to be sat down for too long. They're always trying to get the most out of their employees by being active and encouraging them to meditate and things like that, and encourage that healthy and active lifestyle. So you kind of mentioned everybody pulling together. I thought it was worth mentioning that kind of ethos in the school can really generate something special. And
this is not exclusive to physical education or physical activity. But one of the beauties that I find is there's a numerous ways of being right, in inverted commas. There's a numerous ways of doing things. We all kick a ball differently. We all catch slightly differently, and I think that's something we should really harness in our young people, to provide really meaningful experiences that mean something to them. So those are two examples around actually some kind of skill. But actually, is it about leadership? Is it about resilience? Is it about it getting them to think about themselves? And they might achieve something in PE, which goes on to build their self-esteem and confidence to go and achieve something in another sector or somewhere else later in life. Whereas, you know, a lot of things that children learn, there is a right or wrong. In sport and physical activity, the way in which we go about things is we evolve. It's cyclical. Things sometimes come back, sometimes they disappear. And the great thing is, can we provide really creative, really explorative environments in which allow young people to derive meaning for themselves, to then enable them to go on to achieve some amazing things, whether that's in sport and physical activity, as a leader in the community, like you said, providing sport for other audiences, or somewhere else. It's I think, you know, you mentioned like Google and things like that. Innovation in sport is constant, and there's so many different parts to it that our young people can add to. So I think that's something we could certainly remember.
Absolutely. Sean, I think that's it from me, really, question-wise. That was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. Is there anything you want to add, or anything you want to sort of direct schools towards, or
I can look. Just some things off the top of my head, and there's loads out there. So I'm sure the people that are listening, or certainly the teachers and the coaches, Youth Sport Trust are obviously doing a lot out there at the moment. A lot of the active partnerships are doing a lot of work. You mentioned Yorkshire Sport Foundation. I know a lot of active partnerships are working with Boeing, who are a play-based organisation that do a lot of these small-sided games for homes, etc. And UK Coaching, one of our partners, although that's from a slightly coaching angle, have got quite a bit of resources out there for parents, teachers, and coaches as well at the moment. So it's great. I think it's about shouting from the rooftops about what individuals are doing, what these organisations are doing, and giving as much support as we can to parents right now, and to coaches as well, because let's remember, coaches are going to have to go back to some slightly different situations and environments. So we need to help each other out in that sense. But thanks for having me. It's been good to talk.
No, that's brilliant. And what I'll do is I'll drop those notes into the group around the links that you just mentioned a minute ago to direct people to. But other than that, thank you so much for your time, Sean, and catch up soon.
Pleasure. Cheers. Take care.
Thanks, Sean. See you. Bye.